guys, and welcome back to the Crawl Room. We're here once again in this wonderful ranty room for all things Formula One. So, the Miami Grand Prix has come to a close, and what could be said about that race? Wow, just a brilliant weekend overall, to be honest with you. I'm not a fan of the Miami track. I hate everything it stands for. Trying to charge you $200 chuffing dollars for nachos. It's fucking bollocks, the whole principle of it all. Just basically, get the fuck out of the way, peasants. This is a rich man's game. But the actual race in itself this weekend was fantastic, wasn't it? Not just in the sprint, but in the main race itself. I'm still not a fan of the sprints, but it provided a good race this time around, didn't it? You cannot deny that. And of course the race itself, with the timings of the virtual safety cars and safety cars falling into place for some drivers, other drivers not being so lucky and missing out, it meant that there was a little bit of a jumbled up pack, and ultimately it meant that there was a different race winner. So if you've never seen this series before, I award the drivers out a maximum of 10 points based on their overall race weekend's performance, and I go all the way down to 0 if they have a particularly bad one. Take a look out for bonus points though. They're sometimes an offer of some drivers that do something extra special during a race, and on the very rare occasion I do award minus points to those drivers that do something extra special, but for all the wrong reasons. As this is yet another sprint race format as well, of course, I did it last week in China as well, I've introduced a new little idea to see how it plays out as the season goes on, and that is to award up to an additional 3 points for the drivers that did something really special in the sprint. I don't tend to criticise drivers that do something bad in the sprint unless it's really bad, but yeah, this is what I'm thinking. It doesn't go to every driver, it doesn't apply to all of them, but yeah, drivers that have a really good sprint but maybe not necessarily a really good race can score up to an additional 3 points as we progress. But yes, I will clear all that up as we go on. So let's take a look at the current Crawl Room standings then, shall we? It's on the screen now for you to take a look at. Have a look and see where your favourite driver is going into this race. Can you see them going up? Can you see them going down? There was some impressive performances up and down the field this weekend, and there was some major disappointments as well, it must be said, and those will be getting punished duly, as I'm sure you're already aware. Let's take a look at the team standings then as well. They're on the screen as well for you to have a peruse at. I can have individual influence over this team wall, but at the moment I'm just leaving it as it is for now. But yes, if I feel that the team are seriously letting the drivers down, I can deduct points from this, and if I feel that the drivers are letting the team down, I can award them bonus points to the team to try and get them up into a position that they deserve in this standing order at the moment. But for now, I'm going to leave it as it is. So without further ado, let's kick things off with the race winner then, shall we? It was, could it be? Oh, it bloody well was. On the 110th chance of trying, that was a tongue twister, it was Lando Norris in that mighty McLaren. And once again, McLaren bring updates to a circuit. It bloody well works, and they end up bloody well winning the race. Unbelievable stuff from Lando this weekend. It was all looking like missed opportunities, wasn't it? That SQ2 qualifying session where they were miles faster, well, Lando was especially, it really set the benchmark, thinking, ooh, we could be on for a surprise here. And in the main race itself, it didn't look like it was coming to fruition. The qualifyings went a little bit wayward. They were a little bit further down than where they were expecting. Lando was down in 9th in the sprint qualifying, wasn't it? And then in the main qualifying itself, he was 6th. And it was just one of those things where you think, oh, you know, if it had been second row, maybe we'd have had a chance. But for Lando, the race itself actually didn't start out too well, did it? He had an initial good getaway, but then had to get out the action of Sergio Perez absolutely lunging the whole world into turn 1. And he ended up losing out as a result of that, trying to get out of the throttle and trying to feather his way back into the pack. So after an initial good getaway, slumped down the order where he wasn't really expected to be, yet he was still 6th, which is okay, fair enough, that's where he qualified. But yeah, he was of course expected to make progress, and it looked like he was going to be making progress. And then he was stuck in behind Sergio Perez, of course. The Red Bull really slippery in a straight line and down the back straight, just couldn't do enough for him, just couldn't get around him. But then Sergio pitted, and they knew in that McLaren car that they had got the pace to carry on those medium tyres, and out he stayed. He didn't react, they didn't bother reacting to what Perez did. They just said, no, we have got the pace, and he just kept banging in fastest lap after fastest lap after fastest lap, and he was trying to build the gap over not just Perez but also catch up to the cars ahead that he lost out to whilst he was squabbling with Perez. And then he ended up letting everyone else pit. He became the leader. And then we had the safety car for the incident with Kevin Magnussen and Logan Sargent. The safety car didn't pick up the leader as it was correctly anyway. Ended up picking Max Verstappen up, just to force a habit, I'm sure there. It's a Red Bull pull out in front of that one. But that didn't make the difference anyway, because Lando had already got something like an 11 and 12 second gap over Max Verstappen as it was, and I think under safety car conditions at a reduced pace, I think that would have been enough just to squeeze Lando ahead of Max anyway. But the way that the safety car picked up second place did assist him, and then in the restart itself, he just drove away, didn't he? He came out the last corner, or second to last corner, but first last proper corner, and he accelerated a little bit too early, and he was under pressure for Max going into turn one, and initially around the first lap, I would say, after the safety car had come back into the pits, but then after that drove away, 7.5 second gap to Max. Max had no answer for him, and Lando Norris became a one-time race winner. Fantastic effort after 15 podiums in a row without scoring victory, taking that away from Nick Heidfeld for most podiums in Formula 1 without victory. He finally breaks that duct and secures the win. Fantastic effort, Lando Norris, and for this weekend overall, it's going to be 12 points to him for that. He's getting 2 bonus points because I bloody love him, and it's British bias, and I don't care what anyone else thinks. That was a deserved race. He drove smart, he drove clever, the team played well, so did Lando. It came in together in perfect harmony when at the start of the race it looked like it wasn't going to go Lando's way. A little bit of luck went his way, but when has the luck deserted him when he was in these chances to win? The luck repaid him back, and he secured a stunning victory. 12 to Lando Norris. In second place, we come to Max Verstappen, the first time this season that he has finished in any other position other than first, of course, because the Australia race he DNF'd. So yes, standing on a funny position for him on the podium. I think he felt a little bit queasy there, being a bit low down, Lando being a bit taller than him. Don't think it sat well with him, but nonetheless, P2 for Max Verstappen. And what could be said for his race weekend overall? He didn't look to have the balance and comfortability within that Red Bull that he has had in the previous races, in the previous couple of seasons as well. Complaining of understeer and a lack of grip overall throughout every single session this weekend, and the sprint he held on, and they were like, look, let's not mess with it because we've not got any chance to rectify it again. They're able to take the car out of Parc Fermé, of course, after the sprint race, but then he has to go back into Parc Fermé after qualifying. So they thought, look, it's not ideal for Max, but let's leave it as it is because we know it can still be a winning formula. But as the race itself, he was struggling, wasn't he? He cut the turn 14, 15, 16, that little wiggly-woggly bit in the mid-section, and he hit the bollard and collected that and put that into the road, which caused a brief virtual safety car, which assisted some drivers further down the field, but not the main pack itself. And and then overall from there, he just didn't look comfortable in the car, but was still leading the race. And then, as mentioned already with Lando, the safety car came out while Lando had not pitted. All the others behind him, of course, had. There was about a 12-second gap there, which I think would have meant that Lando still would have come out ahead of Red Bull, but picking up the safety car meant that, unfortunately, it was a little bit of an error there by the safety car driver picking up P2 and not P1. But, that just kind of confirmed that Lando was going to get out ahead. And then, as mentioned, put him under pressure for that first lap, did Max, it must be said, on Lando, getting really close to him, but not close enough to overtake. And then Lando was just able to extend, pull away, and was gone. He was comfortable for second, though. He had a bit of pressure from Leclerc to start off with, but then that kind of faded away. Just got to just outside the DRS zone, 1.2, 1.3 seconds, stuck in that dirty air train, and that was about it, really. So, Max Verstappen this weekend didn't really do anything wrong, but he certainly wasn't overall comfortable in the car that we have known throughout many, many seasons within Formula 1 now. He wasn't at harmony with that car, and unfortunately meant that he finished second and not first. But nonetheless, it's 8 points to Max Verstappen for that. Can't overly criticise him because he didn't really do anything unduly wrong this weekend. It was just outplayed, out-rivaled, outmatched, out-strategised, and just didn't have the overall pace to go after that McLaren in the final phases. 8-2, Max Verstappen. Finishing in third place, we come to la la, oh sacre bleu, sha la 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 la. P3 for him, and yeah, I think realistically the most he could have got out of that Ferrari. It did well in qualifying, looked like they were going to get close to Red Bull, but just didn't quite manage it, did they? There was just a couple of tenths away here and there. Overall, just shy of 2 tenths, wasn't it, by the flag for the main qualifying. And yeah, overall, I think he did a solid job, to be honest. You know, he looked like it was going to go his way, then it wasn't. Initially looked to have out-strategized the McLarens, because they got back out ahead after being overtaken by Piastri. So, you know, it looked comfortable in that respect, but then as the race unfolded and race played out, of course, it meant that he ended up losing out to Lando Norris by pitting before he did. And, you know, it was just how it happened. But I don't think Ferrari did anything unduly wrong this weekend. I don't think Charles Leclerc did anything unduly wrong this weekend either. And it's going to be 9 points for him for me. I think he did a solid job. I can't really speak much about his race because it was pretty okay, to be honest. He fell a little bit lucky in places, fell a little bit unlucky in some places, and overall secured a podium. Yeah, you know, any other day I think they would have liked to have beaten a McLaren, but how it played out was, you know, how it was, so to say. So, yeah, 9 to Shalala, and I've just realised how long I've been recording already. I'm going to have to speed this up a bit, aren't I? Finishing in 4th place, we come to Checo! Sergio Perez, after crossing the line in P5, he is elevated to P4 post-race due to a 5-second time penalty for Carlos Sainz, which, yeah, 5-second time penalties do still exist in Formula 1. Who knew? But there we go. So what could be said for Sergio Perez's race this weekend overall? 4th in qualifying, 5th in the race throughout most of it, and stayed 5th throughout most of it as well, and not really much could be said for that. So, yeah, qualified 4th, running round in 5th throughout the majority of it. It wasn't great, was it? But again, you know, Max still didn't win the race, but Checo should still be up there in the podium places and fighting for it. As it was, P5 in the end, elevated to P4. Nothing special or spectacular. It's a middle 5 to Checo. I think his mindset this season of just trying to be the solid second number 2 driver as opposed to trying to beat Max is playing dividends for him. It really is, it must be said. But still, P4, a lucky P4 really, elevated to P4. But yeah, crossing the line P5 while your teammate's still P2. You should be P3 really, but yeah, nonetheless. Middle 5 to Checo. And as already mentioned, finishing in P5 after crossing the line in P4, we come to Carlos Sainz. Smooth operator, smoothish. I'm not sure, to be honest with you, but yeah, Carlos Sainz this weekend overall, yeah, just didn't go his way, did it, to be fair. We're going to talk about the main incident the most, of course, which was him picking up that 5-second time penalty post-race for the collision with Oscar Piastri, where they got into the second to last corner, which is that tight left-hander, isn't it? Sort of like a hairpin, but it quite isn't. But yeah, got his arse wiggling about a bit, tagged the front wing of Oscar Piastri. Oscar had to pit for a new nose, and Sainz was able to carry on his merry way. 5-second time penalty. Kevin Magnussen's been picking up several 10-second time penalties throughout this weekend. For a lot less, it must be said. And some drivers have not been picking up any penalties at all for a lot worse. So I don't understand where this 5-second time penalty sits, to be honest with you, because it just adds to the inconsistency of the bullshit that happens within Formula 1 and if your face fits, so to speak. So do I agree with a penalty for Sainz for that move? I've got to say I do, because he wasn't in control of that car, was it? And that is why the contact of Sainz's rear wheel happened to Oscar's front wing, which broke his front wing and ultimately took that car out of the points. So I do agree with it, and I do in theory agree with the 5 seconds for that. But when everyone else around him is getting 10 seconds or no penalties at all for worse, then where does this 5 sit in it all? Horse shittery is where it sits. So yeah, I don't really know what to say really. I don't want to go critical on him too harsh, but again, there were good moments of brilliance there, some good moments of racing. He had the measure of his teammate at the start of the race, but wasn't allowed to overtake. So yeah, I've gone for 7.5 for Carlos Sainz this weekend. Maybe generous by half a point there, but I don't want to discredit him too much for hard racing, which is what he did do with Piastri towards the end of the race. But yeah, ultimately it wasn't with his teammate at the end. So yeah, it didn't fall his way with safety cars and stuff, we know that. But yeah, lost his cool a little bit with the radio messages and things. So yeah, okay, 7.5 to Carlos Sainz. Securing 6th place, it is Lewis Hamilton in the Mercedes. Bloody hell, we're getting a nosebleed finishing this high up. What's he had this season? Did he have P5 to start the season and then just several ninths and nothings? But here he is, P6, I suppose 8 points is better than nothing. Yeah, Lewis Hamilton this weekend, I don't really know what to say, to be honest. I mean, the whole sprint race was a whole farce, wasn't it? But I tried to keep the sprint race as a separate entity, and in the end of the day, he did lunge up the inside, and had Alonso not already crashed into Stroll, then Hamilton was going to be crashing into Alonso, who crashed into Stroll, who crashed into Lando. So, you know, some blame does have to go on Hamilton for that incident, even though, in theory, the collisions were already happening. It was almost just like Hamilton just finished the situation off, so to speak. But I'm not holding that much too against him, because he ended up speeding in the pit lane, picking up a 20-second time penalty for that. So, yeah, you know, the sprint's the sprint. He was on the borderline of points, so it doesn't really matter, to be honest. But the main race itself, he raced really well and was on the back of Sergio Perez at the end of that race, so did a great job, to be honest. Gapped the cars behind him as well. So, yeah, he did a good race. He had a good battle. He had a good fight. He was fighting with some decent cars there. So, yeah, credit where credit's due on that. And I've awarded him 7. 7 to Lewis Hamilton. I think taking the whole weekend overall, it would have been nice to see him sneak ahead of a Ferrari, or maybe even that Red Bull of Sergio Perez. But as it was, you know, the fight just didn't quite go his way in the end. And P6, okay, sort of looked into that because of Piastri's misfortune, but still drove rings around his teammate, it must be said. So yeah, 7 to Lewis Hamilton. Securing 7th place, we come to Yuki Tsunoda in the RB. Visa, Cash App, Maxi Tampon, Red Bull, used to be Minardi, Toro Rosso, AlphaTauri, whatever else it is or was. But yeah, you know, Yuki Tsunoda this weekend, sublime, it must be said. He has been really, really good this weekend. You cannot take anything away from Yuki Tsunoda. Pressure was on him, wasn't it, in that sprint after Daniel Ricciardo had a stunning qualifying and Tsunoda was out in Q2 and a lowly 14th. But he recovered in that race to cross the line in P9 with Hamilton's penalty, elevate himself into P8 and get one crucial point for the RB squad in that sprint race. And he was racing around and running in that 8th place for quite some time as well. So credit where is due for that. Really, really do think he deserves some praise for that sprint race overall. Even though he did sort of look into that final point at the end, he did deserve it with the drive he put in on those soft tyres as well. Let's not forget that. Making them last the entirety of that 19-lap sprint was impressive. The main race itself got himself into Q3, so not to be sniffed at for that. And then he just kept carry on and driving really, really well up and down the field. He stayed within inside the points. He was the one that did a Lando strategy, which is not pit. Let's not react. Let's keep going. And then when the safety car came out, he went into the pits and came out the pits and stayed where he pretty much was at that point, which was P8 at the time. And then, of course, elevated the position later on in the race to P7 due to Piastri's misfortunes. For Yuki Tsunoda this weekend, I am giving him a perfect 10 for that race weekend overall. That was absolutely stunning. Can't put a foot wrong there. Qualifying himself inside the Q3 is a perfect, well-deserved effort, and keeping inside those points, not reacting to everyone else. Again, great pace by Yuki meant that the strategy could play out that way. Perfect, absolutely perfect. And for that sprint race format overall, okay, yeah, qualifying didn't quite go his way, but he recovered that and picked up one crucial point for the RB squad and proved that he was able to fight through the field. So I'm giving him an additional 2 for that sprint format. So it's 10 for the race weekend overall, 2 for the sprint format, and a 12 overall for this weekend for Yuki Tsunoda for picking up some solid points for RB and well gapping themselves clear of Haas and the rest of those backmarker teams. They are looking like they are a strong contender for 6th in the Constructors this year, and if Aston Martin don't get their ideas together, they could be pushing for 5th, but let's wait and see. But for now, it is an overall 12 to Yuki Tsunoda. Then we come to George of the Russell. Watch out for what? I'm not really quite sure, to be honest with you. Once again, left pretty speechless by George Russell standards this weekend overall. Not great in the sprint, not great in the race itself. Outraced by his teammate this weekend throughout all of it, it must be said. I can't remember if he slightly qualified ahead of him in one position or what, but I'm not interested in that. The main race itself is where the points count and matter. The sprint he was P nowhere, the race itself he was P nowhere. Very difficult, very difficult. He picks up a handful of points, but he was nowhere near his teammate, Lewis Hamilton, of course, who was fighting with the Ferraris and fighting with the Red Bulls towards the end. Yeah, it didn't go his way ultimately, but he had a go, didn't he? George Russell, not really doing anything special at all. Finishing behind an RB as well, let's not forget that. So George Russell is getting in the middle of row 5 this weekend, probably generous by a point, but yeah, I don't really know. This Mercedes car looks like a bit of a handful to drive, a bit of a pig, but it still should have finished behind his teammate at the very least. There shouldn't have been an RB separating those two, but there was. So yeah, a lack of pace overall by George this weekend. He was a bit clueless by it. We're all a bit clueless by it as well, George. Pull your finger out your ass and get going. Middle row 5 to George Russell. Securing a couple of points in the end after what was a difficult weekend overall. It is Fernando Alonso, of course. Yeah, P9 finish for him. He had a late battle with Esteban Ocon there to try and double his points tally from 1 to 2. Benefited, of course, from the misfortunes of Oscar Piastri falling by the wayside towards the end of that race with the contact by Carlos Sainz, which meant that he could get onto the battle of the final points-paying positions. And overall, you know, the safety car timing worked out in a little bit in his favour. I think he benefited from the virtual safety car, didn't he? There was the RBs, the Alpines, and the Aston Martins that both benefited from that VSC timing when it had come out, because the top 10 had gone through but they hadn't, so they were able to get a free pit stop effectively and then stay within the gaggle that they were just racing with on much fresher tyres. You saw him coming through the field on the likes of Hulkenberg, you know, in the mid phase of that race, because they got so much better tyres and had not done any laps on them at all. So yeah, they didn't lose the deficit, so effectively got a free pit stop. But yeah, that kind of helped Alonso get inside the top 10, but here he is after a good battle with Ocon to secure 2 points. I don't really know what to do for this, but I've just given him 6.5 because I think there's still more in that Aston Martin that both drivers are getting out of it. You know, I do admit that this car is nowhere near as good, of course, as the 2023 car. Not even close, we know that. But to see both for Aston Martin's outside the qualifying 3 zones, getting out qualified by his teammate as well, which is the cauliflower of Lance Stroll, it's not good, is it? Not good. So yeah, Alonso recovered his weekend respectably well to pick up a couple of points, which is more than probably they were thinking of getting at the start of the weekend after such a poor qualifying effort. But yeah, it's not good enough, is it? Especially when you've got the likes of RB scoring big chunks of points now. Yeah, they could be looking behind him rather than looking forward once again this season. It's not all Alonso's fault, but I think there were more left in the tank for him. 6.5 to Fernando Alonso. And the final point scoring position goes to Esty Bestie Ocon. Esty Bestie to you. Ain't like Esty Bestie Ocon. Hooray, hooray, hallelujah, praise the Lord. Alpine have scored un point, 1 point on their tally. I mean, bloody hell. Took long enough, hasn't it? But here it is, 1 point. And in some respects, a lucky one at that. Had Oscar not had that incident with Sainz, then he'd have finished P11 once again. But, you know, sometimes luck and fortune goes their way. They had a respectable qualifying, to be fair, both drivers inside Q2. The first lap in the race itself was a little bit silly by those two Alpine cars. I think they were both expecting to head into the wall at several occasions. I've never seen two cars go side by side through that tight, twisty complex of turn 14, 15, 16, 17 area. But they did it on the first lap, and I was expecting drama, fireworks, and plenty of damage. But as it was, you know, they kept it fair, they kept it clean. It was exciting to watch, but at the same time, you think, what are you doing, guys? You've had a great qualifying, there's a chance of points here. You're going to potentially go throw it away for tiffing and taffing with each other on the first lap. It was a bit needless, that. But, you know, once the race unfolded, again, as mentioned already, the Aston Martins, RBs, and the Alpines were the main beneficiaries of this safety car, virtual safety car period and things like that, where they ended up being on much fresher tyres and losing a lot less time to their rivals around them who pitted under green flag conditions, which elevated them up the field because they were running around the 13th to 15th area at that stage. But as they came out the pits, they were still in that area, but they were right behind the likes of Hulkenberg already, so we're able to, you know, just basically breeze past them. Yeah, Ocon overall this weekend has done a stunning job, a solid job, and I'm giving him 9 points for that. Nice to see Alpine finally pick up a points-paying position and fend off Hulkenberg at the end there as well for that crucial point for them. So yeah, 9 points to Ocon. I'm knocking a points off for that little bit of silliness between the two of them at the start, although it did provide a bit of great entertainment. It could have gone oh so badly wrong, and we could have been chastising both drivers, and it could have been another repeat of Australia 2023. But thankfully it didn't happen, and Ocon picked up a point. 9 to Esti Besti. Finishing just outside the points in P11, we come to Nico Hulkenberg. That's better. So, Nico Hulkenberg finishing in P11 after qualifying himself in P9, making a great start and taking more advantage of the, the lunges and especially Perez, wasn't it? Perez were lunging into the whole world at turn 1 there, and he managed to benefit from that in some aspects and get past both Mercedes cars, which was a good effort. Running around in 7th in the early phases, had a good little battle and duel with Russell, had a good little battle and duel with Lewis Hamilton as well, of course, and I was able to get back past him in some circumstances. His tyres started to fade away a little bit sooner than everyone else's and pitted around lap 13, 14, somewhere around there, under green flag conditions, of course. Some of his rivals reacted to that, others didn't, and then this is where the deficit came into play, and this is what sort of cost Hulkenberg as the race went on, unfortunately. The VSC came out, as we're aware, so some drivers pitted, managed to get out just behind Hulkenberg as opposed to being like 10, 11 seconds back, and ultimately just was able to breeze past him. That were the likes of Stroll, the likes of Ocon, Gasly, those sort of people. Tumbled his way down to around about the 14th area, and then when the safety car period came out for the collision between Magnussen and Sargent, they pitted him again, got him onto another fresh set of medium tyres, so that was helpful in that respect, but was always like down in the 15th, 16th area then by the time the pit stops had played out. Some elected not to pit, etc., with how their strategy was going at that time. But yeah, was able to like make his way through the field and got up to a really solid 11th place there. And as Ocon and Alonso were battling for their final points-paying position and trying to pick 2 up instead of 1, Hulkenberg really closed the gap in that scenario, got sorter, like he could have just done with another lap of battling between Ocon and Alonso, and I think Hulkenberg have had that point nailed on them, because by the time the battling had finished, Ocon was about 1.8 ahead of Hulkenberg, and I think had he just been that little bit closer and within DRS, I think he'd have been able to overtake him. But as it was then, the dirty air, his medium tyres getting chewed up a little bit more than Ocon's hards, meant that unfortunately as the race played out, the closest he got was like 1.010, like 1.010 away from Ocon at one stage. You're like, fucking hell, like so close to an actual DRS zone attack, but just not quite. And then towards the end of the race, it sort of mitigated itself around 1.5 seconds. He had a good charge on the last lap and got under a second briefly, but that was just at the end of a straight that he didn't get DRS for, and ultimately finished just shy of a second away from the final points-paying position. But Hulkenberg, held his head up high with that. A little bit of misfortune there with him having to pit a little bit earlier, but he was racing hard, and that wore the tyres out a little bit harsh at the start. And then in the race itself, then it sort of came good towards the end, but just fell a little bit short. Of course, let's not forget the sprint though for Hulkenberg, picking up a couple of points there, a well-deserved 7th place there, 2 points for them, 2 crucial points for Haas as well, trying to gap their nearest rivals in the no-scoring category. But yeah, it was a good weekend overall by Hulkenberg. So for his overall race weekend, I've gone for 8 points, and I am awarding him 2 bonus points for that sprint format. Scoring points, getting himself into Q3 once again in the sprint, or SQ3. He did a great job. So yes, 8 points for the overall weekend, 2 bonus points for the sprint, gives him an overall score of 10 for Nico Hulkenberg. Next up, we come to the second of the Alpines in Pierre Gasly. Well done, Pierre. P12, it's solid. It's a shame he wasn't the one that benefited from the point scoring opportunities. Gasly was the one that was actually ahead of Ocon, wasn't he? Towards the start of the race after they finished dueling and battling. So yeah, not 100% sure where Gasly lost out there, probably in the virtual safety car period or main safety car period itself. Maybe they didn't pit him, I'm not quite sure. But nonetheless, it's a solid, respectable effort by Gasly this weekend overall. Didn't quite match his teammate once again though when it actually mattered, and there was actually a point on hand as well this weekend, let's not forget that. Ocon has secured a point Gasly hasn't yet, and this season overall has been one very much of Ocon getting the better of Gasly, and Gasly's a driver I highly rate, and Ocon's not really that one I've been rating that much for a number of years now. So yeah, overall, no discredit or disrespect to Gasly, clearly just finding it difficult to get any sort of ambition or drive out of himself, and maybe the car as well, when you're trundling round towards the back. But this weekend there was a chance of points, didn't quite come through, so I've given him 7.5 to Pierre Gasly. I think that's a fair score for a fair drive, 1.5 points less than his teammate who scored a point. I think that's fair overall based on what the performance of each of those drivers are at the moment. But yeah, not doing anything overly wrong, but not really doing anything overly right. 7.5 to Pierre Gasly. Then, finishing in an unlucky for some P13, we come to Oscar Piastri. What's your favourite pastry? I don't know, what a shame. What a shame. What a shame, and everyone's going to think, well, he was struggling there towards the latter half of that anyway. He was battling with Sainz, he wasn't fighting for a win. Fair enough. But everyone will be quick to forget that start of that race where he got himself up into P2 on merit, a fantastic effort, and was keeping Max Verstappen honest and staying within 2 seconds of him, to the point where Red Bull had to say, Max, pick up the pace, we need a gap, and he only got it to 3 seconds. So Oscar was doing a stunning job at the start of that race, and the way that the virtual safety car and the safety car fell meant he did lose places compared to his teammate. He'd already pitted under green flag conditions, which was a little bit of a shame, meant that he was fighting for that P4, P5 area, and then as we already know, Sainz did get the penalty for it in the end, but they had a big battle and a big duel in that phase of the race before it all went wrong ultimately for Piastri, where Piastri was doing some good drives and dives, good overtakes, on the edge, but nothing overly dramatic. It was fair, clean, hard racing. And it was a shame that at the second to last corner, it all came to a head for Oscar Piastri, and he pitted with wing damage. Replaced the wing and changed the tyres in 10.7 seconds, which I didn't think was bad for a wing change, to be honest, and carved his way from dead last of the runners all the way up here into P13 on merit. That's on merit. So well done to Oscar for that. It was a great recovery through the field. He wasn't going to get points, sadly, at that stage. He needed another late safety car, but as McLaren told him over the radio, no risk, Oscar. We need to remind you that Lando is leading this race. So he played the team game in that respect and only really went for the moves when they were fully on. He could have done with a late safety car, but he didn't want to be the one to cause it. Oscar Piastri this weekend, I've given him a solid 7. I think that's a fair score overall based on how his weekend played out. There was moments of brilliance there. There was moments where he could have been a podium. Well, it was easily a podium finisher had it all just been stalemate and nothing else happened in the race. Comfortably P2. Had it played out strategy-wise a little bit better, we could have seen a McLaren 1-3 this weekend. I think that would have been the best they could have got out of it. But as it was, and how it all happened, such a shame for Oscar not to reap the rewards of at least scoring points this race after his teammate wins it. But it wasn't all Oscar's fault. A solid 7 to Oscar Piastri. And following Oscar Piastri after he got taken on the line pretty much, wasn't it? It was a last corner lunge by Oscar to get this driver. It is, of course, Zhou Guanyu in the Alfa Romeo, kick me up the arse, Sauber. That's right, there we go. Well done, I've done it again. I've got it right. Nailed it. Good Josh. Zhou Guanyu this weekend ultimately didn't do anything wrong, didn't do anything right. Q1 exits once again, I was surprised. And in the race, put up some good battles and some good fights. Lost out a couple, won a couple. Were we expecting points this weekend for Sauber? I don't think we're expecting points from this season at all, to be honest with you. There's got to be some fairly major upgrades and updates coming from that car and from the drivers as well to deliver something extra special. But as it was, Zhou Guanyu, here he is, finishing 14th place. Yeah, it's all right. Didn't do anything drastically wrong this weekend, didn't do anything silly or dramatic. But at the same time, nothing special once again. It's a Miller 05 for Zhou Guanyu. Probably generous by a point there, but again, can't overly criticise him. I mean, I know he's been out due and overdue and of the week for quite some time now, but these last couple of races, he's not done anything wrong to give me that opportunity. So yeah, he will score one eventually, I'm sure, but for now, this weekend wasn't it again. It's the Miller 05 to Zhou Guanyu. Finishing in 15th place, it is 0 to 0. It's Daniel Ricciardo. Now, let's just talk about the sprint, shall we? Qualified P4 in that sprint race, finished P4 in that sprint race. Fantastic effort. You cannot discredit him for that. Stunning, stunning job. Brilliant. Well done, Daniel Ricciardo, for that. Everyone was happy to see it. Carry that momentum forward into the race, shall we? No, we shan't. Q1 exit, plus the 3-place grid drop he got for the overtake he did on Hulkenberg illegally in China, behind the safety car conditions, or yellow flag conditions, whatever it were. Starts dead last in the race, and makes little to no progress, and here he is finishing 15th. So despite other drivers and teams winning and losing, you could see where they won or lost, based on how the virtual safety car and safety cars played out. But this time around with Daniel Ricciardo, he was just at the back the whole race. At the back whole race, and never looked like he was going to score points at any given opportunity. Yeah, I know he started on the hard tyre, bloody hell, bugger me, but, there was options to do more there, and he didn't do them. So, yeah, I'm sorry, Daniel Ricciardo, but yeah, after such a great sprint, he's really let himself down again in the race weekend itself. I'm not going to give him an of the week for that, because I don't think that's fair, but at the end of the day, I've given him for the main race weekend itself, bearing in mind this is free practice, main qualifying and the race, 2 points. And in the sprint format, which is qualifying and the sprint race, I've given him 3 points. So he's get 3 points for that. I've singing his praises in the sprint. He gets the 3 bonus points, the maximum you can get for the sprint, but he only gets 2 for the actual overall weekend itself, because it was fairly lacklustre. 0 to 0 for Daniel Ricciardo, but he does net an average 5 points overall for this weekend, and he needs to be thankful that I've introduced those bonus points for the sprint, because without that he'd be getting nothing nearly. Yeah, Daniel Ricciardo, 5 to him. Next up we come to Valtteri Bottas in the second of the steak kick me up the arse Saubers. Lovely stuff. Yeah, 2 points. 2 points. I don't know what I'm there. Again, he was the one that spent the most time at the back of the field, not really doing much, being very lacklustre. Nothing went his way. Virtual safety car, full safety car. He never elevated himself away from the bottom half of the field. Didn't see anything of him. 2 points to Bottas. I know he started on the soft tyres, but at the end of the day, I can't keep giving excuses. It's not of the week worthy, because we know the Sauber's not the best car in the world, but he was outraced at the end of the day by Zhou. And yeah, he might have out-qualified Zhou. I'm not interested in qualifying as much. It matters in the race when points and positions and sponsorship money's on offer and on the line, and you need to get yourself on telly. Saw nothing of Bottas this weekend because he was mostly at the back. 2 to Valtteri Bottas. And finishing here in a lowly, lowly position, we come to Lance Stroll, the cauliflower himself. He's down here. I don't know why he's down here, to be honest with you. What happened? I lost interest. I've genuinely lost. He's just not in my mindset anymore. I just forget what happens to him. He pitted late, didn't he? He pitted under the safety car after he'd already pitted earlier to try and put a fresh set of softs on, I think it was, and it didn't work out, and here he is down at the back. Either way, I'm not really interested, to be honest. I've given him 3 points, probably generous by a point there. Probably should have got the same as Bottas, but at the end of the day, ultimately, the reason why I gave him that extra point was because he did out-qualify Alonso. And I know I've just said I'm not really bothered about qualifying, but when Lance Stroll out-qualifies Fernando Alonso on merit, that matters to me. That does matter. So, yeah, 3 points. I think it's fair. He out-qualified his teammate, but then that was it. That's as good as we saw of him all weekend. And in the race where the points matter, he couldn't recover his weekend after a poor qualifying. It must be said. Even for Aston Martin standards, it should be a Q3 car. It wasn't this weekend for whatever reason. So yeah, out-qualified Alonso, but still nothing special. And then the race itself, when points are on the Sunday, did nothing for it. No points in the sprint either. Just a dismal weekend. Aston Martin would have been better off not turning up, because they had a lot of damage in that sprint race, didn't they? And that was mainly as a fact of both cars coming together. So yeah, shame for them. But yeah, 3 to Stroll. Then, securing 18th place, we come to Kevin Magnussen in the Haas.
I hold the record for most Grand Prix starts without scoring a single point. Why aren't there any drivers that bad these days to beat my record?
And there we have it, a Luca Badoa of the week to Kevin Magnussen. Oh dear, oh dear, oh dear, Kevin. What could be said for his race weekend overall? He picked up loads of points, but sadly they weren't actually for the race itself. It was for his on-track actions, and he's ended up with a total of 10 penalty points on his super licence now. He gets 12, he gets a 1-race ban. He's accrued a lot of those this season. I think it's 7 of them already this season in 2024. and the rest of them were accrued quite late in 2023, so he's got a long way to go before those points shift off his licence within that 12-month period, so he really does need to be careful, does Kevin. And yeah, the sprint, it was over the limit, but I did kind of excuse him for the sprint because he cut the corner, you know, a bit cheekily at the chicane there in the turn 14-15 complex. He did cut the corner. Is it worth a 10-second time penalty though? No, absolutely not. Did he actually gain a lasting advantage? No, absolutely not. But Carlos Sainz takes Piastri out, no penalty at all. Lewis Hamilton and Alonso get together, creating damage for Lance Stroll and Lando Norris. Does that even get looked at? No, it doesn't. There's no penalty there at all for that. There's 10 seconds for cutting a corner, being a bit naughty, and there's a 5 seconds for taking a car out. So we take 2 cars out, we get nothing. We take a car out, we get 5, and we cut a corner and we get 10. Make that make sense, everyone. Make that make sense. The close hard racing he had with Hamilton as well. You know, some of it was over the limit, some was borderline, but he were picking up 10 seconds a plenty for that as well. I'm just like, no, this is not... You don't give penalties for a late lunge, and, you know, okay, it was a late lunge, but it's racing at the end of the day. It is racing. And once you'd screwed him already over with the 10-second penalty for bullshit reasons, then, of course, he was going to do what he wanted, because he wanted to make sure that Hülkenberg scored the 2 points because he'd lost his 1. So, it's stupid. Absolutely stupid. So, the FIA brought the sprint race on themselves with Kevin, and Kevin was a little bit too generous in saying all the penalties were deserved, because I don't think that corner cut was deserved, as mentioned already, when we've got 2 cars taking 2 out, we've got 1 car taking 1 out, and that's 5, and then we've got him cutting a corner, which is 10. Make it make sense, for fuck's sake, will you? Will you just make it make sense, FIA, you silly bastards? But yeah, nonetheless, Kevin Magnussen in the main race itself, not really could be said about him other than a Q1 elimination again, and then in the race itself, took out Sargent. Running round at the back and took out Sargent. So yeah, has to be a Bedoya of the week to Magnussen, because it was just a poor weekend overall, and I'll excuse him the sprint, but I can't excuse his poor performance in the main race itself, in the qualifying or in the race. So yeah, there we go. Kevin Magnussen, Luca Bedoya of the week to him. And finishing in 19th place, we come to Alex Albon. Unfortunately, that's the first of the Williams.
I had an engine failure whilst running in the points. Not only did I burst out in tears when I got out of the car, but I still cry about it today.
And there we have it. Unfortunately, a Luca Bedoya of the week to Alexander Albon. I mean, what could be said? This weekend was not Alex's weekend overall, was it? Williams were buoyed by confidence that they were going to be having a car that suited them this weekend, and it's just not worked out that way, has it? It must be said. Alex, I don't know what to say this weekend. It was tough, wasn't it? And to show how tough it was, let's forget the lock-up in the race at the late stages. That was by the by. You know, he was running round outside the points anyway. You know, yeah, it's a shame that he ended up finishing 19th instead of 13th, but it doesn't really matter at the end of the day at this phase of the race. Alpine got that point anyway. They're still ahead of the Sauber squad, so... yeah, wasn't actually that damaging that moment, but what was damaging for me this weekend, to give Albon the Luca Bedoya of the week, was that sprint performance. Okay, lap time deleted, which meant he was out-qualified by Logan for the first time ever. Yeah, you could say on merit, could say not. After 28 attempts of trying, Logan finally did it. Yeah, Alex made the mistake, got that lap deleted for track limits, fair enough. But then Logan Sargent ended up finishing in 10th place in that sprint, and Alex was nowhere. So, you know, and Logan was on the soft tyres, and you'd have thought they'd have chewed themselves to bits by the end, and he held on. So, yeah, you know, that was the telling one for me, the sprint overall. And I know I always say I class it as a separate entity, but when you're judging a weekend overall, you look at that and think, well, there was that mistake in the race. It was an okay qualifying in the main race, but it wasn't brilliant. The sprint format itself was dismal on both fronts. Yeah, so yeah, the combination of absolutely everything led to just a poor weekend for Alex this weekend, and an overall very poor weekend for the Williams team. So that's a huge shame, a huge disappointment. And unfortunately, it is a Luca Bedoya of the week to Alex Albon. Not much more I can say on that. Don't want to be too harsh or critical with him. You know, Williams are clearly going through this restructuring phase, which just isn't working out at the moment. I don't think it's all Alex's fault, but this weekend there was a moment where Logan Sargent genuinely beat him on merit, and that's a little bit concerning for me. So yeah, it is Luca Badoa of the week to Alex Albon. Let's hope he comes good in Imola, but for now, it's yet another poor weekend. And last but by no means least, the only retirement in the race as well, of course, it is Logan Sargent in the other Williams. What a disaster. I said Aston Martin may as well not bother turning up. I think Williams are doing better not turning up even more than them. I mean, what is this? This is such a shame, isn't it? Logan, though, I don't know. I don't really know what to say for his weekend overall. It was maybe showing signs of promise in that sprint format, as mentioned already, with Alex being out-qualified and out-raced by Logan. Fair play to Logan for that. Fair play. And in the main race itself, okay, Logan was down the bottom end of the field, like Bottas was, like Kevin Magnussen was, like Ricciardo was, like Stroll was, throughout the majority of that race. But he didn't do anything really wrong. Yeah, he should have been higher up the field, I get that, but at least he wasn't doing anything massively wrong, and then he was wiped out by Magnussen. I don't really know what I can say for that. That wasn't Logan's fault. It's more damage for Williams that they didn't need, but it wasn't his doing. It wasn't his fault this time around. So I've taken a little bit of sympathy with him, but in no way am I praising him. But he's going to get 2 points for the main race weekend overall in itself, and 2 bonus points for what he did in the sprint, because I think the sprint format itself deserves those 2 points. Out of a maximum of 3 I can give for the sprint, I think 2's fair for that. 2's fair for the overall weekend, gives him an overall score of 4, and he's a retirement as well, which I can normally only score a maximum of 5 anyway. So he comes well within every rule I have assessed and judged by, and I think that's fair overall for Logan. I'm not singing his praises by any stretch of the imagination, but he did out-qualify and did out-race Alex Albon on merit in that sprint. And in the main race itself, yeah, wasn't doing anything special or spectacular, but certainly wasn't going to be Luca Badoa of the week worthy up until that point. But then he got took out by K-Mag, and that really wasn't his fault. So yeah, there we go. 4 overall to Logan Sargent. And there we have it then, guys. Those were the runners and riders of the Miami Grand Prix weekend. Let me know your thoughts and feedback down below. Did I score any drivers too high, any too low? The updated standings that I have just awarded are on the screen now for you to take a look at. Have a look and see where your favourite driver is now. Did I score any fairly? Did I score any too harsh? You know, as always, you guys know to let me know in the comments section below. I look forward to having a chat with you and a discussion in there. It's tight at the top, it's quite lonely at the bottom. There's a lot of changes to be made as the season progresses, but we're already finding that pecking order out with just a few rounds into the season. And yeah, as always, keep me letting know if you like this sprint format. I am keeping it for the remainder of this season. Let me know if you think there's any tweaks I should do, maybe a maximum up to 5. Maybe I should score a set amount of drivers. Maybe I should score 5 drivers, for example, a maximum of 5, 4, 3, 2, 1 or something like that. Let me know in the comment section below what you think about the sprints, because as much as I hate them, they are becoming a real big part of Formula 1 now. I think they're only going to increase from here, and I need to keep on top of that and keep it fair for the drivers that are scoring good sprint races but maybe not as good race weekends, etc. Let me know. And let's take a look at the team standings then, shall we? They're on the screen now for you. I'm not messing with these, not changing these at the moment. I'm letting it play out, see how it's going, see how we're going to get on. But at the moment, I think Williams do deserve a little bit of a boost. I don't think it's all Williams' fault at the moment that they're so far down this pecking order. Maybe Alpine need knocking back a peg or two because their drivers are doing a solid job, but Alpine aren't really providing a car that is worthy of being that high up in the championship. So yeah, maybe tweaks are to come with this. I might score the points at the end of it and say, look, it's going to be -10 to these, +5 to those, etc. But at the moment, I'm leaving it as it is. I'm letting it play out. We'll see how the season gets on. I think we'll get into Europe first, and then I'll have a good mess about with this team standings and see if any team majorly fucks up with strategy or something. It's bound to happen. A massive thank you, as always, goes out to Dan Bartlett, of course, formerly of Mushy Gaming, for providing me with the scoreboard that you saw on your screen, the driver icons that you see in your bottom left or right, wherever they go, and for the intro as well. Without him, this series would be more pointless than it already is. And who can forget Dave, F1 Games PlayStation, for providing me the of the weeks that you all know and love. Thank you so much to you guys for your continued support with the series and for making it what it is. Thanks so much for watching, guys. I'll see you all in a couple of weeks' time for the Emilia-Romagna Grand Prix. Is that what we're calling it? Or is it still Imola, San Marino? I don't know what they bloody call it these days. Anyway, not interested. But yeah, nonetheless, I'll see you all in a couple of weeks' time. And if you're interested in Formula 8, I'll see you all next week. Thanks a lot for watching, guys. And as always, much love.